everyone, and welcome back to the workshop. Today I am making something truly special. This solid walnut blank will become a fine dining plate designed by a professional chef from a high-end restaurant. He sent me this exact sketch with precise measurements and curves that follow his own presentation style. My job is to turn this drawing into a real functional serving plate. The design is very specific. The top of the plate must be perfectly flat, completely level, so the presentation of the dish sits clean and stable. But the underside is different. Here, the curve needs to rise gradually toward the outer edge, creating a light and elegant profile when viewed from the side. It's a clean, modern concept with a raised center and a thin, elegant edge, and every detail here matters. I start by drilling a 55mm hole. This gives me a secure grip point for the jaws. Once the hole is ready, I mount the blank on the lathe. The first thing I do here is screw up the side of the blank. By cleaning up the side, I remove any vibrations and turn it into a perfect cylinder, and that gives me a stable and accurate starting point for the rest of the plate. I start flattening the bottom of the plate. I begin with a 16mm ball gouge to remove the material and get the surface close to flat. When I'm satisfied with the base, I mark the final diameter of the plate. Then I use a flat scraper to remove the excess wood on the side, reducing it down to the exact final size. This gives me the true outer dimension and a clean, straight cylinder to work from. Now that I have the final outer diameter, I can mark the area that will become the foot of the plate. This section will also serve as the tenon for the jaws when I turn it around. With the foot marked, I define the final thickness of the plate from the side. Here I also set the exact thickness of the rim so the plate keeps its clean, modern profile. These measurements are extremely important because they ensure that every plate in this set will be the same size and match perfectly. With the tenon and the final wall thickness already defined, I can now focus on shaping the underside of the plate. Since this is one of several plates in a matching set, consistency is extremely important. Every curve, every measurement and every transition needs to be identical so each plate matches perfectly. For the shaping, I switch to a 12mm spindle gouge. This tool gives me the precision and control I need to follow the chef's sketch closely. The underside of the plate has to rise gradually toward the outer edge, forming a clean and elegant curve. It's a subtle shape, but it makes a big visual difference, and it also helps the plate feel lighter and more balanced in the hand. I take my time with this step, working slowly and allowing the profile to develop gradually. The spindle gouge makes very clean cuts, but walnut can change grain direction quickly, so I adjust my angle and pressure as I go to avoid tear out and keep the surface as smooth as possible. Once the general form is in place, I switch to a rounded scraper. This tool is perfect for refining the curve because it follows the shape naturally and helps me smooth out the transitions without creating any flat spots. The rounded scraper removes small ridges or tool marks left behind by the gouge. It's not an aggressive cutter, but it gives me excellent control when I want to fine-tune the shape and make sure the underside is clean, even, and flowing smoothly from the foot toward the rim. The transition around the foot is especially important. It needs to blend in softly, without the sharp step, so the plate sits stable on the table while still keeping the modern, flowing design the chef requested. Every little adjustment here makes the final plate look more refined. I stop the lathe regularly to check the profile from the side, because that's the best way to see if the curve is even. If I notice a slight high spot or an uneven transition, I go back with a scraper and correct it until everything looks perfect. Once I'm satisfied with the shape, I double check all of the measurements, the height of the foot, the overall thickness, the rim thickness, and the curve itself. Matching these dimensions across multiple plates is what gives the final set a professional and uniform appearance. Now that the underside of the plate is fully shaped, I can focus on the center area. I want to add a small detail here, something subtle that looks elegant and not just functional. A simple flat bottom would work, but a refined touch makes the whole plate feel more intentional and handcrafted. To shape this detail, I begin with a 12mm spindle gouge. It gives me precise control, so I can form a clean, smooth transition toward the center without leaving harsh lines or sharp corners. Once I have the shape I want, I switch to a 12mm curved scraper. The rounded edge follows the contour naturally and lets me refine the detail until it blends perfectly with the rest of the underside. This small addition isn't necessary for function, but it adds personality and gives the plate a more finished, polished look. With the shaping complete and the curve exactly how I want it, I can now move on to sanding the bottom of the plate. This is the stage where everything starts to feel smooth, refined, and ready for finishing. I begin with 120 grit. This removes the last tool marks and levels out any small imperfections, making sure the entire surface flows cleanly from the foot toward the rim. Once I'm happy with that, I continue with 240 grit to further refine the surface and bring out the natural movement of the walnut grain. At this point, the plate already starts to feel much smoother under the fingertips. To achieve an even finer finish, I spray the wood with denatured alcohol. This raises the tiny fibers in the grain, allowing me to sand them down and create a much cleaner final surface. After the alcohol dries, I go back over the entire underside again with 240 grit, removing everything that lifted. Then, to complete the sanding, I switch to my small orbital hand attachment and slowly work up to 400 grit. With the entire bottom side now finished, I can finally turn the plate around and start working on the part that really defines this design, the top surface. This is where the chef's idea truly comes to life. If you've made it this far, thank you. Let me know in the comments what you think about the shape so far and whether you prefer this modern curve or a more traditional flat bottom. The next stages will be even more interesting because the top of the plate needs to be perfectly flat and precise. So stay with me, the final result is definitely worth seeing. Now that the plate is turned around, I can start shaping the top side. This part is the most important because the chef's design requires a perfectly flat surface with clean, precise lines. To bring the plate to its final thickness, I use a combination of a 16mm bowl gouge and my skewed scraper. The bowl gouge lets me remove material quickly and accurately, while still keeping the cuts smooth and controlled. Once I'm close to the desired thickness, I switch over to the scraper. The angled edge helps me refine the surface and make sure everything is perfectly straight and even across the entire diameter. With the thickness set, I can now mark the important details on the top side. The first line I draw defines the raised center of the plate, the area that gives this design its modern, elevated look. Right next to that, I mark the inner section where the food will actually be served. This part has to stay perfectly flat, so the dish sits clean and level, exactly as the chef intended. These reference lines show me how far the flat section needs to extend and where the raised center should begin. Keeping these proportions accurate is essential, especially when making more plates in the same style. At this point, I measure the depth of the serving area. According to the chef's design, this section needs to be exactly 2 centimeters deep. Since it's still a bit too shallow, I make a few careful passes to bring it down to the correct depth, keeping the surface perfectly flat as I go. With the depth of the serving area set, I can now move on to shaping the outer wall of the plate. For this part, I start with a flat scraper, because the entire side needs to be perfectly straight and clean. According to the chef's design, the top of the plate must sit 1.5 centimeters higher than the outer wall. So I begin by setting that reference line on the inside. Once that line is established, I continue shaping the outer side to match it. This step requires precision, because both the inner and outer lines need to meet at the same height and angle to keep the profile balanced. A small change in either direction would be noticeable when the plate is viewed from the side. To refine the shape, I switch between a small rounded scraper and a larger rounded scraper. The smaller tool lets me work close to the transitions and establish a clean, controlled line, while the larger one smooths out the longer curve and removes any small tool marks. Working back and forth between the two helps me keep the surface even and the profile flowing without any flat spots. This part of the process takes time, but it's one of the most important stages in the entire build. The straight outer wall combined with the raised center is what gives this plate its modern, fine dining look. If the wall isn't straight, or if the transitions aren't clean, the whole design loses its elegance. And if you've stayed with me until this point, thank you. This is where the plate really starts to show its character. The shape is coming together, the proportions are taking form, and we're getting close to the most satisfying part of the whole project. In just a moment, I'll start refining the raised center and the top surface, and that's where the true beauty of the walnut grain finally appears. So stay with me until the end. The final reveal is worth it, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this shape. Would you use a plate like this in your kitchen, or do you prefer traditional wooden bowls? Let me know in the comments. Your feedback always helps me improve and motivates me to create more pieces like this. But for now, let's continue shaping, because the most beautiful part of this plate is still ahead. Now I move on to refining the top profile of the plate, using a combination of a small rounded scraper and a larger rounded scraper. I always start with the inner section first, because this area sets the reference line for the rest of the shape. With the small scraper, I can work very precisely and follow the curve exactly the way I want it, without leaving harsh transitions or deep tool marks. Once the inner part is clean and the line is clearly defined, I switch to the larger rounded scraper to shape the outer line of the plate. The longer cutting edge of the bigger scraper helps me create a smooth, even curve across the entire surface, and it allows the two sections to flow nicely together. Working back and forth between both scrapers gives me the best control. The small one handles the tighter areas, while the larger one smooths out the long sweeping curve and together they let me form a very clean profile without flat spots or heavy marks. This step takes some patience, but it's essential for achieving the elegant, modern look that this plate design requires. When both lines meet perfectly and the top starts to show its final shape, I check the entire surface one more time. If I see any tiny irregularities, I make a final pass with the scraper until everything is perfectly smooth and consistent. With the shaping complete, the plate is ready for the next stage, sanding. This is where all these careful cuts truly pay off, because a clean profile sands beautifully and reveals the natural beauty of the walnut grain. With all the shaping finished, I can start sanding the top side of the plate. I sand it the same way as I did on the bottom, starting with 120 grit, then moving to 240 and raising the grain with denatured alcohol before sanding again. After that, I switch to my small orbital attachment and finish the surface all the way up to 400 grit, sanding in both directions to get the wood as smooth and clean as possible. This step takes time, but it makes a big difference in the final feel of the plate. And while I'm working through the sanding, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. What kind of dishes do you think would look best on a plate like this? Fine dining, desserts, something completely different? Let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading your ideas, and they often inspire new projects for future videos. With the shaping complete and the entire surface sanded all the way up to a smooth 400 grit, the plate is now fully prepared for the final step. This is the moment where everything we've done so far comes together: the curves, the lines, and every small detail we shaped until now. Before applying the finish, I always like to pause for a moment and look at the plate as a whole. The surface is clean, the profile is balanced, and the walnut is ready to show its true beauty once the oil goes on. For these plates, I'm using Danish oil because, in my experience, it's one of the best and most durable finishes for pieces that are used around food. It penetrates deeply into the wood, protects it beautifully, and really brings the grain to life. As soon as the oil touches the walnut, the color becomes richer, the contrast increases, and the whole plate finally reveals its character. This is always my favorite moment, when the piece transforms from a carefully shaped form into something elegant, warm, and full of depths. And with that, we've reached the end of today's project. Thank you so much for watching and spending this time with me here in the workshop. I hope you enjoyed the process and maybe felt inspired to try something similar yourself. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you'd like to follow along with future projects, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. You can also share this video with anyone who enjoys woodworking or handmade pieces. It supports my work more than you might think. Let me know in the comments what you think about this plate, the shape, or the design. Your ideas always inspire new projects. Until next time, take care, and thanks again for watching.